What drives a people to cross passes at 10,000 feet, camp on a volcano, and raise shelter on the hottest ground on Earth? And what keeps that way of life alive for thousands of years, long after every walled civilization built around them has fallen? Iran. Beyond the mosques and the bazaars, Iran hides something else entirely. Hidden behind the Zagros, above the volcanic plateau of Sabalan, and deep into the Lut, 5 tribes spent centuries carving a complete civilization into every mountain range, every step, and every desert they crossed. In footsteps, not stone and mortar. You will not find it in any history book. It lives in every step taken through snow, in the knots you cannot replicate, in a tent raised at dawn and folded before midday. It leaves no mark on the ground you just crossed. This is the journey into the last of Iran's civilizations that never stood still. The Zagros Range runs 930 mi from the Turkish border down to the Strait of Hormuz. The Bakhtiari have read every inch of it as a calendar. At its heart rises Zard Kup, the yellow mountain peaking at 13,148 feet. Small glaciers cling to its upper slopes, the only glaciers in the subtropics outside the Himalayas, the Andes, and the Mexican volcanic belt. The Karun and the Zander rivers both begin near Zard Kup, fed by snowpack. The mountain hordes through winter and releases through spring. Why does a 100-degree gap between the high passes and the land plains become the thing that moves an entire people? The range creates 2 entirely different worlds separated by altitude. The lowland plains that the Bakhtiari descend to in autumn push into the mid-80s. That gap of nearly 100 degrees is the engine the Bakhtiari run on, driving them upslope in spring and back down in autumn. Limestone ridges fold in parallel rows across the terrain, cut by gorges that funnel water and wind in predictable directions. 5 crossing routes thread the range, and the Bakhtiari have used them for at least 8 centuries. The paths barely change because the mountain barely changes. A family that crossed a gorge in the 13th century crossed it by the same stones their grandchildren cross today. Here, the rock itself records what the seasons will do. Snow lines mark which passes open first. Ice on a north-facing wall tells a herder how many days remain before the route closes. The Zagros works as an instrument, and the Bakhtiari learned to play it before writing arrived in this language. A Bakhtiari camp packs onto muleback and disappears without leaving a mark on the ground beneath it. The Bakhtiari number 800,000 people organized entirely around this capacity to move and vanish. The Seor, the black tent, comes from the hair of the goats the Bakhtiari herd. The fiber is waterproof, breathable, and weighs exactly what a mule can carry at pace. It goes up in under an hour. It comes down the same way. When the camp moves on, the ground shows only the pressed outline of where the poles stood, and that fades inside a season. Inside the tent, labor divides without discussion. Men handle the animals, the routes, the crossings, and the negotiations with families at shared watering point. Children start working the slopes with the goats at 9 or 10. By 12, a Bakhtiari child can read weather from cloud formations and read terrain from the lead animal's behavior. Meat sits heavy and slows a person down. The diet shifts to yogurt, soured milk, and flatbread baked directly on stone. The body stays light. The pace holds. Every tool and every piece of clothing serves the movement. Nothing is carried that cannot earn its weight over 185 miles of mountain terrain. Drop south from the Zagros and the air changes register entirely. The far province opens into oak woodland and grassland. Warmer, lighter, and more forgiving than the mountain country behind it. The Qashqai have worked this terrain for at least 5 centuries, organized as a confederacy of clans since the 16th century. Estimates put their current population at around 400,000, making them one of the largest nomadic groups still actively migrating in the Middle East. Their winter pastures concentrate near Firuzabad and the lowlands around Shiraz. The positioning follows the terrain, which sits low enough to catch southern warmth, while the northern ridgelines deflect cold winds from the high country. The Qashqai chose this ground the same way the Bakhtiari chose their roots, by reading what the land does across seasons. They speak a Turk language which marks their ancestry as distinct from the Persian-speaking tribes further north. They are known across Iran for a certain artistic confidence. The women weave, the men ride, the ceremonies are loud and long. In a country where nomadic culture has been under pressure for a century, the Qashqai have held their identity with unusual stubbornness. In late autumn, the plain outside Firabad holds a specific quality of light. It is the light that arrives when a landscape has exhaled after the long heat of summer. The grass is dry but standing. The air is cool, and along the roads the first camps appear. I feel I should. A Qashqai woman weaves a gab the same way she remembers a year without notes, without a pattern drawn in advance entirely from what she has seen and felt. Why does a woman weave from memory alone, with no pattern and no notes? The gabber, the word means raw or unfinished in Persian, comes off a horizontal ground loom that travels with the camp. The frame is simple, but the weaving demands months of exact, repeatable work. Wool from sheep grazed at altitude carries more lanolin than lowland fiber, which gives it a softness that holds dye at exceptional depth. The colors come from plants gathered along the migration route. Roots and bark and flowers boiled and fixed into thread. A small gab measuring 3 by 5 feet takes between 18 and 25 hours to complete. A larger piece runs for months. Some weavers describe working for the better part of a year on a single carpet. Every design decision happens in real time without consultation, because there is nothing to consult. The pattern lives in the weaver's eye. What ends up in the cloth is the landscape she moved through. Mountains appear as triangles, flocks as repeated diamond shapes. A good lambing season might show in the density of animal forms. A year marked by a particular river crossing might give the border a specific shade of brown. The carpet is a record compressed into wool and color of a year lived in motion. The tradition has passed from mother to daughter for more than 500 years. The finished garba rolls up at last. A year of mountains and flocks held in the wool. The Qashqai wedding is the one moment in the year when the scattered clans locate each other. There are no fixed addresses among people who move twice a year. News travels by encounter at watering points, along shared route sections, at the margins of seasonal markets. A wedding announcement rides these same channels weeks in advance. It spreads outward through the network of families until the day arrives and the camps converge on one piece of open ground. The women dress in layered silk, deep reds and vivid greens and electric blues. The colors register from a distance against the dry grass and pale stone of the far lowlands. The dress is meant to be seen. The dancing forms in circles, arms linking, scarves lifting and dropping in rhythm. The carrer, a long brass horn, carries the beat across the open ground. Its low register cutting through wind and distance. The men organized the animals, the spaces, and the logistics of feeding a gathering that might run for 3 days. The older women managed the seating of families, the sequences of the ceremony, and the 100 small decisions that keep order in a temporary city. By the 3rd day, alliances have been noted and marriages beyond the one being celebrated have been arranged. Information about pasture conditions, route changes, and family news has moved through the gathering. The carrer plays out the final evening. The camps separate before dawn, and the plain is empty by mid-morning. Sabalan rises 15,784 feet above the RDL plain. It holds a contradiction at its summit that no other mountain in northwestern Iran can match. How does a single summit hold a frozen lake at its crown and boiling springs along its slopes? At the very top, inside the crater of an extinct stratovolcano, sits a lake. It stays frozen for 10 months of the year, locked under ice that does not release until midsummer.